Well, welcome back, everybody, to another Thursday where we sit down and we talk to people in the industry. It could be farmers, it could be scientists that are studying hemp or maybe studying soil samples, it could be legal experts that are going to talk to you. But today I got Casey Flippo here with me from Natvana, which is a processor in central Arkansas, more south central Arkansas. And we're going to talk about the relationship between the farmer and the processor and everything that kind of goes with that. We're even going to get into contracts and how you develop contracts. So first things first, I want to hand it over to you and tell me about Natvana, what you guys do, when you guys started, and where your product's going.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time, Robert, and the opportunity to you guys. First and foremost, Natvana is a processor as well as a product manufacturer. So we have completed that full vertical. We help our farms, take products either to the wholesale market or, transition their plant-based material into end user products for consumption or topical applications or, whatever their desire is there. So Natvana was founded in February of 2019 between myself and one of my best friends from college. He's got a little bit more of a farming background. He's a fifth generation farmer, where my family come from a little bit more of the private business sector. And, collectively, we've always talked about doing something together. And then obviously when we started diving in on the opportunity that is hemp, we decided that not only would it be an excellent opportunity for us to, collaborate both of our skill sets, but to also bring a new, revenue stream and potential marketplace to the state of Arkansas. So that was our primary motivator, obviously, with him being a traditional row crop farmer and all of the tariffs and problems that we've had with China and, the world market this year. I think the core value, the reasoning behind us starting this initiative and starting our journey with this is, to really look at things from the farmer's perspective and give them an opportunity to work with a company that's working on their behalf as opposed to just trying to maximize the dollar. So, we don't have some really great story like Charlotte's Web or anything like that, but the biggest thing for us as a motivator is just making sure that the farmers have a voice and making sure that our farming partners know that when they work with Natvana, they are getting the best care possible for their material.
So I always hear, and I've read this in every industry out there, when it comes to growing product, you must have a contract before you start putting seed in the ground. And you hear it all the time, and it's very, very true in the hemp industry. I remember reading an article or a paper that was written about 15 years ago from Australia. And in the first paragraph, it drove home, you need to find a buyer prior to growing.
Yes.
When this happens, why is that so important? Why is it so important? Because some people think, well, I'll grow all this and it'll just sell like hotcakes.
Right.
I'm not seeing that.
Right. So I think that an important perspective as it pertains to that specific question is to really look at the landscape as a whole. A lot of people don't know this, but hemp has been grown in this country for hundreds of years prior to it being moved to the scheduled drug list in the early 90s. So, that really kind of hindered the market for a short period of time. But back in 2014, with the Farm Bill passing, states like Colorado, California, Oregon, and some of your more liberal states brought hemp back on a full scale. It started developing these marketplaces, and really what it did was it drove a lot of people out of the black market and into the light a little bit. It was an excellent opportunity for, cannabis guys, if you will, to heighten their skill sets and use those for good. And they were making a lot of money, to the point that you just made. Processors such as myself were few and far between. So they were gobbling up every bit of material that they could get at that point, so futures contracts were prevalent. that's where you saw those numbers. Like if you hit on Google, how much will I make per acre of hemp? That's the $60,000 to $100,000 an acre lotto pick back then in 2014. That trend kind of stayed consistent until we exceeded about the 75,000 acre mark back in 2018. And then you started seeing some lull periods, some ebbs and flows in the marketplace as it pertained to biomass sales, which is ultimately what the farmer wants to hear about, right? So with those ebbs and flows, processors had to start getting creative because, with the lowering or with the increase in supply, obviously the overall demand and the overall need to pay top dollar for that starting raw material or raw ingredient became less prevalent because you could get it whenever you wanted it, right? So as we saw in 2019, you go from 78,000 acres planted to 230,000 acres coming out of the fields, 500,000 plus acres approved. That's extremely problematic. I mean, in any industry, right? If you triple your output overnight, if you will, any market's going to bump. And with that, the nature of the industry right now is, yes, it's very important to have those connections. It's very important to be proactive and make those relationships with processors. But from what I've seen, at least for most processors out there, we're having to get creative, and it's not really a greed thing as much as it is a necessity thing on our part as well. I can't really commit to $1 per percentage point 6 months out because it might be worth 50 cents, and because of the futures, the uncertainty and the volatility of this emerging marketplace, you're seeing fewer and fewer actual purchase orders or purchase agreements at the end of the year, and more toll agreements, which obviously we'll allude to a little bit later as we talk through like different options for farms. But that's the first step, is find a processor you trust, figure out what direction is important to you, and come into it with a plan. A smaller farm, you may be apt to go to end consumer products and increase your profitability by 15 or 150%, whereas a larger scale farm, you're going to have to play the whole market. So have a come in, do your due diligence, talk to a lot of people such as yourself, and vet processors, talk to processors, see what options are out there for you, and ultimately go with who is best for you.
So let me ask you this. When it comes to processors, on the industrial hemp side, when it comes to fibers and grain and seed, you normally want to have your processors within a 75 square mile radius.
Yes.
Largely because you're talking about a ton of harvested material that you're going to send in. I really wouldn't call it biomass as much as it is like, it looks like hay. So it's a ton of weight. And so your logistics have got to be a little closer. But when you're talking about this, you don't have the processors right now for fiber and hemp. So that's a whole other
right. That's a whole different conversation.
The whole other market. And first and foremost, if you don't know the two markets are different, stop what you're doing and understand that these markets are drastically different. That being said, should farmers focus on closer processors to their point in retrospect to where their farm is located? Is that something they should take in consideration?
So let me give you the most honest perspective and the reasoning behind the most honest perspective that I can give. I'm talking to a representative of the HPAT in Texas. I know that there are a number of processors coming online in Texas this year, and I know that a lot of the people that are viewing this are going to be from Texas, right? Mm-hmm. Being from Arkansas, it very much behooves me to encourage people to find out-of-state solutions and all of these other things. But that's not really my perspective, to be honest. My perspective is, with interstate transit being a little bit of a problem in this space just due to lack of regulation, in the event that you can find someone locally or regionally that meets your needs, I'll be the first to raise my hand and say, please do that. That is an amazing opportunity for you and them to grow. And trust me, as the only commercial scale processor in the state of Arkansas last year, and watching so many of our phenomenal farmers choose to use out-of-state options, it kind of hurts, and we ended up doing just fine. But it's something that I encourage the development of processors in this space. I don't want to discourage processors that are down in the state of Texas by taking all of their potential material away from the state. Mm-hmm. That being said, I will give that with a little bit of an asterisk. It's extremely important to understand that from a processing perspective, not one size fits all. Every single processor is vastly different, whether it be methodology, whether it be the infrastructure that they have in place, whether it be their team. Like we invested into a PhD level chemical engineer to run my lab because we knew we were trying to go completely vertical. It was important for me to make that investment. Some people might put more of an investment into the pre-processing. Some people might put it into the product creation, So it's just important for farmers to find what is best for them and what is best for their business model before they decide who they're going to ultimately go with. That should not really be swayed by logistics as much as it should be by the individual business models aligning.
As processors start coming up online, let's say in a 100-mile square radius of whatever town that you live in currently, as more processors come online, you're going to start seeing the competition weed out the ones that are not going to last and the ones that will last. And hopefully you'll be able to start seeing better relationships between local farmers. But I think that's further down the road than right now. Yes. So finding your best option is finding the best person that's the closest to you, but more importantly, that's going to get you the best bang for your buck.
Absolutely.
Yes. As more processors come online, that logistics will start to shrink down.
Yes.
So it may be something that you that you work with as best options as you have right now. Hopefully further down the line, they will. Texas has opened up, and it's I think Sid Miller has done about as good of a job as can be expected for Texas when it comes to talking about hemp and how to regulate it. And there's a lot of things that need to change that we currently have. A lot of things in the 2019 Farm Bill that need to change, or the 2018 Farm Bill that need to change, such as the decarb and the 0.3% and all this other stuff. So let's dive a little bit into that. First thing, before we get into the 0.3%, yep. Let's talk about what type of farms are you looking for? Because this will lead into the 0.3%.
Absolutely.
Very much so. So let's talk about when you're choosing a farm, or what is it that you look for? Is this a beggars can't be choosers situation? And where do you hope to be in 5 years with the relationship that you have with farmers?
Absolutely. So that is like, I would call it the golden questions, right? Because it's so important for both processors and from farmers to understand things from this perspective, because when you start breaking down these different processing models, they're going to come with different restrictions for each farm. I'm just going to kind of touch on this, but for a toll processor that's reliant on splitting the material at the end of the day, they are going to be extremely, extremely stringent on the material coming in. They're going to probably want to work with primarily produce farmers or people that have a little bit more in-field experience with these, more of a gardening style plant than a row crop, So I think that to answer that question directly, obviously quality over quantity any day as it pertains to my business model. But that's not to say any subset of person or any subset of, classified farmer can't do this. The biggest thing for my row crop farmers out there is, this is not the same plant. This is very, very, very different, and it is very, very important for you to take that into consideration. Whenever you're talking about putting in industrial hemp for the extraction of cannabinoids, this is a very labor intensive, and it's important for you to know what's in that soil and what your surrounding farmers are doing before you decide to move forward. So As it pertains to, the specific farmer that we're looking for, that's not necessarily the way we look at it. We always, as a standard SOP before we bring a farm on, is we do exclusive one-on-ones with myself and my partner who has a little bit more of a farming background to get just some generalized knowledge, education, transition to our farms. Secondarily, we talk about things like soil sampling, testing for heavy metals, nutrients, pesticides, any residuals that are going to harm that plant. And then we ask them about geographic problems that might arise as it pertains to, if you got a Liberty bean field like 5 feet away from your hemp field, maybe not the best field to use, right? So it's just extremely important to treat every situation independently. And it's very important for those farmers to understand that there's no trick in the trade when it comes to pesticides, herbicides, and treating those plants. You have got to use the specific guidelines that are set out in front of you, because even if your biomass comes back and it does not show any of that as plant material, once it gets to me, once it gets to your processor, we're going to find it. We're concentrating these compounds by like times 10.
Oh,
so
it's all going to come out.
If it's in there, we know it's there. Yeah. Right. If it's in there, we know it's there. So that's really kind of the best perspective that I can give, because I don't think that really any one person, I'm not going to lie to you, one of my best farmers this year is an insurance salesman, which is crazy. But he put in 2 acres and he did the right things. He let us help him and guide him. And I mean, he had 6-foot monstrosities at, like 12% with an awesome nose. So,
see, that's another thing too. People tend to think that you can kind of get out there and grow, but a lot of it has to do with the hands-on experience. How much experience do you have growing, whether it's tomatoes or cucumbers or something, and you just have a knack for growing. Yep. Growing at a small rate and growing at a large rate are 2 very, very different types of growing operations, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I like growing my own tomatoes and everything of that nature, but I don't think I could do it on an industrial level.
Right.
I'm not a farmer, right? So I wouldn't be able to have that kind of experience. There are some people out there that do, and the experience that they have, would you say that it really impacts the how lucky you're going to get to hit that 0.3%? The experience you have in farming and how you take care of plants will really determine your percentage results at the end of the day.
So I'll take it one step further than that and say, like, even if you are an experienced farmer, that's a hard mark. Okay. Like, everybody needs to know, like, that's not a, you put it in the ground and 100% it's coming out, but yes, to answer that question, people with a little bit more of hands-on experience, I would kind of rank it as, your produce farmers up here. They're going to have a little bit more insight, because they're going to give each individual plant, they look at farming from an individual plant basis, whereas a row crop, you look at it on the entirety of the field, So I think that they are probably more apt to give each plant the TLC needed to reach that threshold or stay underneath that threshold. Mm-hmm. And then that immediately is followed by your traditional, large scale row crop. But it's extremely important to understand, to your point, Robert, is no matter what you do currently, I have farmers out there that do 7,000, 10,000, 12,000 acres of other things. A 10-acre hemp grow is a lot of work.
A lot of work.
That's a lot of work. So
yeah, I was reading somewhere where they were talking about, and I had to pull it up again in my notes. There was like 6 to 7% that you're going to have per acre that will wind up being hermaphrodite or male that you're going to have to pull. And these are small things you have to consider when doing this. Is this something that you talk to them about?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. So let's touch base on that, and then I want to start getting into the contracts.
Okay. Yeah. So just, as it pertains to the field and what you can expect during the growth cycle, the first part to understand is when these plants go under any type of stress, they begin producing THC. It's like a calming mechanism, I guess.
Yeah.
They're mellowing themselves out, if you will.
Don't you wish we had
So,
that?
yeah, right, exactly. So, but I mean, no, it's really cool how these plants do that. I mean, not for some people, obviously, if it goes above 0.3, but
Right.
just in looking at the plant itself, when they begin to stress, you start seeing the THC levels rise at higher rates than you normally would, right? Secondarily to that, these plants are prone and apt to hermaphroditing, which ultimately is the plant is converting from a standard feminized plant over to one that will produce pollen, drop seed, and can ultimately lead to a failure. So, or at least a crop decline in overall yields. So it's extremely important, again, the labor intensive piece to this pulse, getting out in the field every couple days and walking it and looking at things on a very micro level as it pertains to each individual plant, their nourishments, whether or not those types of conversions are happening. And we are huge proprietors of in-field testing. So, take samples from plants throughout your period or throughout your grow period, whether it be the best state, and certainly once you start seeing flowering, all the way up to harvest, to be well worth the investment to track your plant's progression as it goes. So if you're getting a visible infection, on a regular basis, and you're looking at those chemical compounds being formed in that plant throughout its growth cycle, you're certainly going to increase your likelihood of success by tenfold.
Outstanding. All right, well, let's start contracts. I know a lot of people are going to be interested in that because they always hear, you had your contracts set up. How does this happen? Do they approach you? You approach them?
I would love to approach them. So please, let me know who to talk to.
Right.
No, I think I hit the nail on the head a little bit earlier when we were talking about the streamlining communication in this space. Just is developing. It's an evolving, an emerging marketplace. So it's just not as easy as you would think it is. A lot of times, even our state plant board, in Arkansas, we work with them on a weekly basis in communicating ways that we can help. We're invited to some of the board meetings to talk through some issues, but even then, we have 270 something applications filled for this year, and we've only got access to like a third of those names and emails and phone numbers. So I think that creates a little bit of a problem. And one of the things that I can just say straight up as it pertains to reaching out to people, Facebook is not a bad tool. That's how you and I got to know each other, right?
Yeah.
But don't bank on everything you see on Facebook. Don't make your business all about Facebook relationships. Like, make sure that you talk to Sid, make sure you talk to other people in your program, and ensure that your name is on the list. Ensure that you are being posted and promoted by the plant boards, because processors like me, that's the information that we go to. If I want to promote myself to Texas, I'm going to go through your plant board and find whatever I can as it pertains to people's information to reach out to them and let them know that we're an option. So actively pursue opportunities like that. To the point we made earlier, because of the lack of communication and the streamline in the supply chain, we're forced to use unorthodox methods such as, a Facebook or a LinkedIn or something along those lines.
Right.
And one thing that I will say is kind of a caveat to this statement is every single farmer needs to know the difference between a processor and a broker. Like, those are not the same thing. If somebody reaches out to you and they are saying, hey, I can facilitate, a $3 per percentage point sale at the end of the year, this, that, and the other, like, verify, okay, who do you work for? Let's take a look at the lab. Like, let's talk about the specifics. You don't want to work with somebody that spitting out false promises. So part of the responsibility ultimately falls back on the farm to make sure that their information is out there for the processors. But just as I'm doing today, I mean, it's important for the processors to put their best foot forward as well and make sure that people know that there are options out there for them. So,
right. No, I 100% agree with that. When it comes to contracts, do you guys have different types based on the type of maybe farmer or maybe the size of the farm that works with you?
right. So the answer is, as an industry standard, yes, there are three main types of contracts that you're going to see. We are using our specific business model to just cater to one of those. And I can kind of allude or talk towards like why here in a moment. But just to kind of give you a generalized overview, we kind of touched on a couple of them earlier, but the first model is more of a purchase agreement, which would be either based off of a price per weight or price per percentage point, meaning the potency percentage in your plant. And ultimately, that's a processor saying, "Okay, Mr. Farmer, you're gonna have 1,000 pounds at the end of the year, right? And I'm going to pay you $1 per percentage per pound. So if you have 10% material, that material is then worth $10 a pound, right? Your 1,000 pound then is worth $10,000 at the end of the year." So that model is one that I think a lot of farmers were promised last year. And as industry developed and did what it did, you saw a lot of processors, whether it be intentional or unintentional, some processors just caught in a bad situation, right? Back out on those agreements. So because they saw, okay, I promised this guy 2 percentage point, the going rate right now is 70 cents. So I'm going to lose my shirt if I, go forward with this. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of there's a little bit of risk reward in play for both parties. Just do a very good job. If that's the direction you choose to go and the processor you choose to work with, vet that processor. Make sure that deal is going to be just as good in October and November as it is in, May, June, and July. That's one of the biggest things I can say to people, because that's the the cloak and dagger, if you will, for farms, is somebody coming in promising the moon, and the farmer gets just tag shocked, and he doesn't want to hear any other opportunity for himself, because he's going to make $45 a pound at the end of the year, and then that guy that person that's working out of his mom's basement just disappears all of a sudden, so right, yeah. It's just very important to note that. And then the other two are kind of a little bit more where your industry as it pertains to processors trend towards, which are toll processing. So there's two subcategories of toll processing, the first of which toll splits, the second toll contracts. The difference between the two is quite substantial in my opinion, but they both fall under that toll category. So when somebody presents a toll opportunity to a farmer, be sure to do a little bit more digging and to make sure that you know exactly what the intricate details entail, right? The first one I'll talk about is the toll split model. This was the model that we farmers last year as we were just getting started, and it was our first year in operation. We didn't feel comfortable with the space enough to do exactly what I just said and say, hey, we'll pay $2 a percentage point or whatever. So we went out and we presented toll splits at a 50-50 toll rate, meaning we would take in the material, no money would exchange hands, and as a part of that, we would perform a service, and at the end of the day, we would take 50% of the oil as payment. That's a very, very standard model. That's one that you're seeing a lot of people move to from a processing perspective, because the overhead that goes into purchasing biomass, running your, machinery, and then have back end is just extremely problematic.
So you're seeing a lot of people medical marijuana as well. A lot of absolutely. Caregivers up in the Maine area, they'll send in X amount of poundage, and they'll keep a certain percentage, and you get a certain percentage back so you can sell it. So I've seen that model. Yeah, and that's marijuana.
It's really become, in my opinion, probably the most prevalent model. So that was what we did last year. And this year we've moved to a contract toll. So this is the other toll opportunity. And what it is for the processor is it's a service-based model. So the farmer comes to us and, ultimately says, I've got this material and I would like to facilitate it to you guys. We come up with a predetermined price point, and our base rates are the lowest in the country. I mean, we have so much going on as to that, which we can talk about momentarily. But the contract basically is, at the end of the day, the farmer gets 100% of the oil. So, you're going from losing 50% of your total potential revenue to paying up front for, at least if you work with us, a nominal fee. And then on the back end, you have access to 100% of your oil, in which, at least my company, we assist in marketing that material on your behalf. So one of the biggest differences between those two models is obviously, with one, we own 50% of the material and you own 50% of the material at the end of the day. And then the other is you own 100% of it. Most processors are going to say that they're going to assist in facilitation of sales at that stage. And when you're in a toll split model, and this is really, again, going back to our core value of trying to look out for the farm, this is really where it becomes problematic with the instability of the marketplace, and with that processor that has the high of extraction and whatever refinement they're doing. In the event that 1,000 kilos to at the end of the day, and you have a buyer come to the table looking for 500 kilos, do you think that they're selling the farmer's kilos first, or do you think that they're selling their kilos first?
Oh, of course, they're selling theirs first.
Exactly. And unfortunately, most processors out there, while they certainly probably do have some downstream supply contracts, probably can't afford to facilitate their entire capacity as it pertains to, selling that material on of everyone. So that's what created a problem with us last year. And to be honest with you, we just had an internal conversation, and I was like, man, I was talking to my partner, Corey, and we just decided that that's not the field we want to play in anymore. I hate, having to take the lion's share of these sales, and that's the big draw to oil anyway. But you got all these farmers' materials sitting there just withering away while you're having to sell your oil just to stay in operation,
Right.
So that's really where we moved to the contract toll. And contract tolls are not new to this industry. This is something that's been done since 2014 in certain areas. The difference between what we're trying to accomplish and what a lot of people are trying to accomplish, a lot of people just do the standard formula. Okay, I can either do a 50-50 split, or I can bill by the pound to get me roughly the same return, right? From our perspective, that's not really fair, because the farmer is paying for the service on the front end, assuming more risk than they would otherwise. So we kind of reverse engineered the solution, and really, I mean, we've had great success because we're billing at about 1/5 or 1/6 of, market standard for contract toll rates right now.
And the oil that you guys get, and it goes out, you have your own brand.
Yes.
Natvana. And then you also have, do you sell that to other companies to make other products?
Yes. So our primary business is wholesale of crude and distillate for further refinement purposes. That's actually probably where the bulk of our oil goes. We've used to date roughly 200 kilograms of distillate for our own product creation, whether that go to further refinement with isolate, THC free, whatever. But primarily, our main outlets are people looking to focus on the further refinement, so they're buying wholesale oil.
Let me ask you this question. It's a little off topic from what we have been discussing. Isolate, yes, you mentioned it just recently. And I've talked to people who feel that isolates is a great opportunity to do business with both pharmaceuticals, makeup companies, food grade companies, and things of that nature, which does make obviously a lot of sense. You have these crazes, like right now it's the CBG craze. You hear that quite a bit. My belief is that I think that these crazes are good. I think they're a little bit more blown out of proportion than the reality of them.
Right.
But they don't think that that's necessarily a wrong thing. I think it's just That's the way it works. This is the way markets evolve. Remember, this is an evolution of a market. This market is so fucking new that we have no idea where it's going to go in 10 years because we don't have the foundation. Where I can do a 10-year plan with corn and wheat and several others, I couldn't necessarily do that and be nearly as accurate with a hemp plan, largely because we don't have the infrastructure. Huh?
Couldn't do a 10-month.
No, yeah, right. So there's a lot of risk, but one of the ways to mitigate that risk is to really understand and know who you're doing business with. Take the time. If you've got a license, you're gonna have to, which there's several of them that are being distributed right now in Texas. If that's what you're wanting to do, contact the process. Contact Casey and find out if what you're doing, where you're located, what you're trying to grow works well with him, and start building these friendships, start building these, because that's really what it is. It's a business friendship. And when you do contracts, you do them 1 year at a time, correct? You're not doing 2-3 year contracts right now.
So correct. Yes. And I think that, to speak towards the conversation you started earlier with like 5 years in the future, I would love for us to, distinguish our guys, our farming network that makes most sense for us. And eventually that be the ones that are growing on our behalf. Right. Mm-hmm. But as it pertains to right now, we just do annual contracts starting upon harvest and going towards, into the following year. So
what about processors and co-ops? How does that work? Do you have an opinion on that?
Give me a little bit more detail to the question.
So we got co-ops that are starting to pop up in Texas and of course around the world, especially around the United States. These co-ops are specific to cannabinoid and or hemp growing. Now, some of the co-ops that I've run across are vertically integrated, and right, which means that they're going to have somewhere down the line, they have their processing involved with it.
Yep.
And if it's not already going on, it's in the plan by the end of the summer or by the end of the year to be established. So have you thought about working with co-ops to maybe to intervene into that, into the processing side of the farming? Because what happened with some of these co-ops is that it's the co-op, but they found a processor and then made a deal to say, hey, you'll be our processor for this co-op.
Right.
So
yeah.
Have you run across anything like that?
Yes. We get the most in this emerging market. I mean, it's horrible when it comes to like your time commitment, but it's so amazing to me, like the ingenuity and the creativity that are going into like trying to find a winning hand, so we get offers every single week to do so many different things as it pertains to cooperatives, working with other processors, like to handle backfill, to, having like little niche groups of farms that will, kind of work with us exclusively, whether it be formal or informally. And to answer your question, we're obviously always open as a new business to look at any avenue for success for both us and our farming partners. With that being said, we really like to evaluate and assess each opportunity individually. And we just haven't found the right fit as it pertains to a specific cooperative right now. Right. We have one working in the state of Arkansas right now, coming out of the Northwest. We've been presented with to be the exclusive processor as it pertains to that. It came with certain stipulations and requirements, such as things that we're already working on, like CGMP and, ISO and things like that. So I think that these co-ops are definitely trying to do the right thing, and they're trying to facilitate opportunities, but man, we're a niche or a niche like craft processor, and because of that, I like doing my own research on my farmers,
Yeah.
And because of that, I've just really been reluctant to just take a blanket, these are the people you're going to be processing for, and running with that. So
I think staying small right now is easier to navigate these waters. Being too big, it takes so much capital to right that ship. And in a time where people are very nervous about entering into this, because I have sat into rooms with people of the wealth of the billions, right?
Right.
And you bring up hemp and you bring up CBD, they're not so excited about it. And one of the reasons they're not so excited about it is it's a saturated market. Every time we look around, we see many multi-level marketing campaigns doing this. We can name a few of them that we see on a constant basis where people are becoming, they're just sellers of a product, and they create their own little Facebook page or website, and they sell this product that's been distributed out. And we see the test results, but the test results are what they are. We don't know how accurate they are. We don't know where they came from. And 99% of the people don't even know how to read the test results anyways.
Absolutely.
So, and they don't know what they're looking for. And I think it would be a good idea to probably do that at some point in time, is to go over that. So maybe I can get one of your lab guys to work with us
100%.
test results, and I could learn a few things myself.
Yeah.
The reason I'm bringing this up is that because it's such a saturated market and people are finding it very difficult to find investors to start it. Starting small is far more appealing to an investor than a large operation.
Yes.
It's much easier to write that ship.
Well, it's a dip your toe in situation, right? Like nobody, if you do any type of due diligence into this space, nobody has the same expectation level as they did in 2014, 2015, 2016, right? Or at least you shouldn't. And if you do, just as Robert said earlier, please go Google. Just go do some due diligence, right? Or call me, and I will give you the God's honest truth as it pertains to the industry as a whole. So that's an excellent point, and I think I'm going to go off on a little tangent. So just hear me out briefly. So, to quote one of your very own, as it pertains to Texas, Mark Cuban, who I personally follow like he was my own father. I just love him to death. He's an amazing business, and his philosophy on this is just like hands down one of the ever come across. So, when asked about hemp space and cannabis space in particular, he was talking, about the CBD craze, and he gave an awesome thing that just kind of stuck with me. And I apologize because I don't want this to be misconstrued. I'll allude to what I'm talking to in a moment. But he said, there's the way I view the hemp space right now is it's the three. You have the innovators, the impersonators, and the idiots. And he said it's like an ebb and flow. It's kind of like a bell curve chart as to how that works in an evolving marketplace. And when he elaborated, he said, I think right now we're in the impersonator stage, and we're slowly trickling into the idiot stage, to where a lot of people blindly doing things because they hear some guy talk about it on, some podcast, or they read some article that was written by www.420bros.lovetosmokepot.com, and because of that, you have, before this year, the trend was bigger. It was capacity.
Max
we
out,
talk
max
about
out.
Yeah, and like for us as a processor, I mean, I say we're boutique and we're craft because we pay attention, just like we're asking our farmers to do with the plants. We pay attention to every single kilogram that comes through. We pay attention to every single number. We pay attention to every single process we start for our farms. But I mean, we do 1,500 pounds a day. And I feel like that's a commercial scale, and that's really one that we can produce quite a bit of material throughout the course of the season. When you have this trend that was set a couple years ago to where people think that 20,000 pounds a day processing is something that's even remotely feasible, 40,000 pounds a day processing, it's important for farmers to take that in consideration as well. where are they getting rid of all that product? Like, especially if you're going on a toll split with that person, that is a lot of fuel that they have to sell before you make a penny, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And pertains to that, the market is not there. Like, I cannot shake my head hard enough that you cannot gain that type of outputs year over year. If you did, the person lab would own an 80-foot yacht and live in the Bahamas next year. You know, I mean,
Yeah, it's still the
there's
old
just not,
economics simple, shit in, shit out, right? You got to have output and inputs got to be balanced, and
yeah,
it's not.
it's not at all. And it's creating a race to the bottom. So it's important from an educational perspective for people that want to do this past this next year or the next year, to let farmers know and let people that are looking for real opportunities know, be mindful of all of those things. Like, these big guys, they're great. Like, I actually know a few of them, and they are phenomenal guys. They're trying to do something that hasn't ever been done before. And I'll stand on the sidelines and clap them on the whole way. But I'm like, man, you're producing 7,000 kilograms of oil a day. Where are you going to get rid of that? Like,
Where's it going?
if you can get rid of that, please take my 200 and get rid of it too, you know?
Well,
So,
one of the things I've always stated is that in the hemp industry, you have two foundations that really need to be established. It takes time to establish these foundations, like any other market, but between farmer and processor, then processor to retail or manufacturer, however you want to say it.
right.
These are two elements that need to be focused on. And if you can get this aspect great, where you're producing 700 pounds a day of oil, or however much you're producing, you have to be able to sell more than that over here.
Yes,
and until that starts to even out, I mean, it's an ebb and flow. It's just like this, and that's hard. You cannot really estimate what you're going to do in a year or two if your market's doing this all the time.
Yes, and it's to the point that we made earlier, it's a short-lived problem. This is an emerging marketplace, and literally, if you go read some literature on the gold rush, like, this is the green rush, period. Like, you have people that don't get, billion-dollar signs in their eyes and that are trying to establish a long-standing, sustainable business. And then you have some people that, to the, business model that I just mentioned, that what they're going to do is they're going to be in operation for a year, maybe 2 years. You're going to process the crud out of some oil. It's going to be sitting back in a cage by the droves. And then they're going to go out of business because their overhead is $150,000 a week to produce that, right? And what's going to happen over time is, right now you're seeing a bottoming out of the market as it pertains to, output price per unit. But what that's reflective of is, I was reading the most recent hemp benchmarks yesterday. That's dozens and dozens of processors going out of business every single month.
Mm-hmm.
That's what you're seeing. They're fire selling their material. They're getting rid of it because they're just trying to cash out and be done.
Right.
And it's the encouragement to that. I'm not an economist as it pertains to, like, being able to rub my crystal ball and tell you what the future holds. But from my perspective, and if you hold that perspective, eventually that well is going to run dry, and then we can build on the ashes and create a sustainable marketplace to where, hopefully, the actors that are in, from the farmer all the way to your point, the manufacturer or retailer, or even end consumer, have a very streamlined supply chain. And I think that people such as yourself, Robert, and people like me, that's really what we're staying in the space for. That's really what I'm banking on, is that levelization. And then obviously with further regulation as it pertains to the FDA, the ability to market to big box stores and, internationally with ease, that's going to create whole new end consumer marketplaces as well. So
I agree. It'll be interesting to see how it pans out. We like I said, it's all very up in the air, but I think if you can start small, do your education, understand this is not a get rich quick field. you can do really well in this industry. But there's going to be several years of weathering the storm until it gets on its feet. That's with any other market that is introduced. The unique thing about this one is that it's so illegal for so long that you just don't have the technology and the infrastructure to bring it back around like you had with anything else that competes with this. And so until you see this hemp industry competing at a level of other materials, plant-based materials, you're not going to get the billions that everybody wants to see.
Yes.
It is a $1 billion industry, but a lot of that is trial and error.
It is.
So when people look at this, it's like, oh, it is a great industry. And yes, you can do really well, but this is a marathon. This is only a marathon. There's no quick ways about it. And I really appreciate you coming on, man. I really do. I like having a point of view that's going to talk about farmer and processor relationship when we deal with cannabinoid farming. That's what I like to call it, cannabinoid farming, because that's really what it is.
It is.
CBD, CBG, or anything else. I think it's an awesome market. I think that it's got a ton of value to it long term. You know, where that oil goes to, what it can be implemented into, different there's several different things that oil can be used for, not just for health reasons, but there's other issues too. So there's things that we haven't even thought about. You know, there's electronics that can be used out of hemp. There's, you know, all types of things from construction to logistics to fuel, and we have tons of things in front of us, and it's going to take a while for it to develop, but I see it happening, and we do see this moving forward. Now, it may not be moving forward at the rate that we want to, but that's life. But I really do appreciate you coming on, Casey. Really do. You guys are killing it over there, and I appreciate it. Anything Absolutely. We can do for you? Anything you want to say last minute?
Just one, I really appreciate the time on the podcast or video cast, and you know, I really think that guys like you, industries such as the one being developed in Texas, it's going to really help the space as a whole move forward. So thank you so much for everything that you're doing, and then obviously anything that we can do to help, we'd be more than happy to.
We'll let you know, man. We appreciate it. We'll talk to you soon.